Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, India's largest digital platform where we invite entrepreneurs like yourself to connect face to face on a national platform with some of India's biggest experts, asking your questions to them directly about the issues that are most topical. I'm Sunanda Jaiseelan. Today, we are talking about the Mumbai model, how Mumbai has managed to control the spread of the COVID virus and lessons that the rest of us could learn, and also what we should keep in mind when it comes to the rest of the year, particularly given that the third wave of the pandemic is looking more and more likely. What should you, the small business owner, do? All of that being dissected on today's masterclass. Let me introduce our panelists. Niranjan Hiranandani, co-founder MD Hiranandani Group. Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, Care Ratings. Thank you so much for your time with us here today. I want to start with the theme, the topic for today's masterclass, talking about the Mumbai model. What are perhaps some of the biggest lessons that we can take away from the mini containment zones, from the containment zone, from just being so proactive really about containing the pandemic in Mumbai that the rest of us should be learning and taking away? Mr. Hiranandani, I would like to come to you first.
The Mumbai model has actually been stated by none other than the Supreme Court of India as one of the best examples of work which has been done during the COVID times. The positive story, according to me, is the fact that the municipal commissioner, the government actually started with the idea of chasing the virus. I think this was a unique idea. I don't think anybody has ever thought of that before. And really, they went ahead. And of course, the great story became the Dharavi story, one of the exceptional locations with so much congested area that we were all petrified of the fact that we would never, ever be able to come out of that situation. However, the reverse was true, and we were able to get it done. So the first thing was chasing the virus. And this is some story that continues to be that in those areas where the virus is, COVID situation is dense, the idea is to go into it, get the thing done. So you start with testing and then you move towards containment. So one was the universal lockdown, which means the city, the country, the state, the districts were actually locked down. But later on, that was changed, because you couldn't have a permanent universal lockdown through the country, through the state, through the districts, through the cities, because otherwise the economic necessity of the situation would be horrendous. So the partial containment areas, in some cases, the buildings were contained. Some cases, the floors were contained. Sometimes the apartment blocks were contained. So that was the issue. The other next one, which was unique again, was a good partnership between the state government, the local authority, and the private sector. I think that was unique at all. The private sector kept 80% of their beds for COVID situation. However, this was overall managed by 23 centers. Each ward had a separate center wherein they had an ambulance, they had doctors, they had various support staff, and all this went on to make a particular system that worked very well. Of course, there were many bigger things. The bigger things was the COVID centers, care centers that were created on a temporary basis, where the beds and the oxygen and the ICUs had to be done. And last but not the least, Sunanda, you have to keep talking about it, which is vaccination. So I think all these factors took place together in order to make the Mumbai scheme work out in terms of what it did. Of course, it needed hand-holding by everybody within the system, especially the healthcare workers really were outstanding. It was unbelievable to see the doctors and nurses and the other healthcare staff, which did a humongous job of the entire activity.
Sure. Okay, Madan, let me give you the chance for your opening comments as well.
The way I look at it is there are three parts to a particular problem. The first thing is, when do you identify a wave coming in? I think there are always early signals which come, but we tend to live in denial. And once it comes, there's obviously the panic, there's a threat given to the citizens that you people are not doing well, I'm going to take some action, and then you finally take action. I think that's one particular piece which I think we haven't yet sorted out. Hopefully, when we have the third wave, we will have systems in place and we'll be able to take action before it really arrives. Part two is, I think Mr. Hirandani has probably explained it very well about what Mumbai has done. And I think what is important is decentralization matters. So if we had this kind of a decentralized approach in every region, every state in which we had this problem, I think conditions would definitely be far different. And we may not be having those horror stories which we read about in different parts of the country, Bangalore and say Delhi, for example. But the third part, I think that's where I think we need to really deliberate upon is how do we get out of this mess? Okay, so we had a problem. We've addressed it to a very large extent in a place like Mumbai. It's probably being addressed in other cities and other states too. But how do we get business back on its feet? Because we should remember, it's one thing to say that I've heard lots of statements that even the governor of RBI today said something to the extent that industry was better prepared. But I don't know if you're actually prepared for such a thing. Are you really prepared to say that tomorrow onwards you have to shut shop and you're not allowed to operate? I don't think people are, it's that easy. But anyway, the general view is that people are better prepared. But I think the question is that, do we have a certain package in mind? Do we have something which we can help, especially the SMEs, because I think they get battered every time we have a kind of a lockdown. So I think that is where we should be focusing on from now onwards.
For all of our entrepreneurs who've logged in today and are saying, what's really going to happen? We were hoping perhaps that 2021 would be the year when things would start coming back to normalcy. Yes, the second wave hasn't been as bad for the economy as the first wave. Manufacturing has been allowed, etc. They're looking forward the next couple of months, perhaps there is not much of a silver lining. What are some of the proactive steps, whether it's on part of India Inc., whether it's part of the government, whether it's the vaccination policy, that needs to be proactive? Mr. Hiranandani, do you want to take this on first?
I think the issues which we have on the table are going to affect the small and medium manufacturers into a much operators in a much bigger way than anybody else. Luckily today, I think the Reserve Bank of India has taken cognizance of this fact and provided adequate funding and financing for this sector. So that's been the first mover that we have really did. Maybe over a period of time, this will be followed up by some action from the finance ministry also. And because this is the sector which is most badly affected. Also, along with this sector, look at the media sector, the real estate sector, the sector relating to hospitality, travel and tourism. All these sectors have had the informal sector, the man, the Hatgadi wala on the street, the persons who are doing selling bhelpuri at Chopati and stuff like that. So all these small and medium people who are there, the small person on the street are definitely affected. Hence, the calibrated approach that we talked about, wherein different segments are going to open up in a different sort of way as early as possible, becomes the most important factor that we are doing. So as they said, a calibrated approach in terms of opening out became necessary, and that is what is being followed up. However, those which are at the bottom of the pyramid, what do we do? There are two angles which I think government is looking at and probably needs to further expedite. Number one, the food security issue. Today, we have a huge amount of food grains in our warehouses, and this needs to be distributed even more lavishly than it is being done. I'm not saying it's not being done. It is being done. What really needs to be done is even more lavishly to be done, because it needs to be done in the urban areas as such. Because that part of it also needs to be taken care of in terms of it, similar to the angle that Manrega is there in the rural areas. I think the type of people who are unemployed in the urban areas also need to be taken care of. Manrega or a food security issue could be taken up, and you have plenty of stocks into it. And luckily, agriculture operations indicate that even in this year, the food is going to be in a surplus. So I think all in all, the first thing would be a food security issue. The second part of it would be the health and hygiene issue, which we are talking about. And that means, one, looking at that the healthcare should be adequate in number. I think a lot of ramping up has already taken place, but we also need to see, I think all in all, whatever we do is going to become less, because the more we vaccinate today, the less problems we are going to have in the third wave, which is likely to come. And the last point of it all would be what would be the extent of additional preparation that we need to do for the third wave. All these three factors, I think, would help us in order to save the people today at the economic side, and also to see that the future in this section is also taken care of. The finance minister has also mentioned that she would be taking this through a step-by-step opportune time response, which is there. And we hope that that will actually happen, because that is what she has committed to the people. And we are looking forward to all these things, especially in the small and medium sector.
I have to take a quick break. On that note, we're going to come back, continue taking in our viewer queries, and also talking about the lessons that we have perhaps learned from the first and the second wave, and being able to implement that the third wave. We're back in just a moment. To stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass. Today, we're talking about the Mumbai model and the lessons that the rest of us here in India can take away from India's financial capital when it comes to containment of the deadly coronavirus. Madan, let me come and talk to you about the macroeconomic figures that we've seen of late, which is on the GDP. Government estimates releasing on Monday showing that India's GDP contracting 7.3%. This is in 2020-21. If we are perhaps not on track by the festive season to see this mass vaccination, what sort of an impact are we going to see, one, on sentiment, as far as growth really coming back into the economy? Because we're not just looking at quarterly figures here, we're also talking about the past decade and the kind of growth or the contraction really that we've seen in the Indian economy.
In fact, if we have looked at, if you're looking at 21-22 and what exactly is going to be the impact on growth on account of these 2 months of lockdown, it may not be as sharp as what we had last year. But definitely in terms of expectations, I think most of us had expectations in a double-digit number. And today we have seen that even the Reserve Bank has scaled down their growth projection to 9.5%. So it's evident that having a lockdown definitely does affect the economy. We can still take credit in saying that we'll be one of the fastest growing economies in the world. But the fact remains that there's been a major setback which has been received for the second time, especially for the SME class, and within the SME section, I would say in the services sector. I think what's going to get impacted now is that what we're taking for granted in agriculture may not really materialize, because we're talking of the infection spreading even into the rural areas. Now, I'm not quite sure about how the sowing is going to take place, whether the infection, the number of people who have been affected, is going to come in the way of the manpower required for sowing. But for sure, we know that the infection has increased. You're spending more on healthcare. There's less money available for discretionary spending. And I wouldn't be surprised that this rural demand story, which we always keep banking upon, may not quite play out in this particular year.
Sure.
Second problem we have is in terms of employment. Now, there can be conflicting ways of looking at employment. I prefer to go by the CMI data, which I think is fairly authentic, and it captures the true scene. We have seen that employment has been affected, and that also goes well with the fact that 2 months of lockdown, again, going back to the SMEs, if I shut my shutters, I cannot possibly employ the people who are there. People have gone back to the villages, maybe not in the large numbers which we saw last year, but the fact remains that there is less employment, there are fewer jobs being created. And I think more important than that is that this creates a lot of uncertainty. And I think business always requires certainty. If we are told that, look, there's going to be a shutdown, we are operating in October 1st onwards, I think business is better prepared. But this business is waiting for every 15 days to find out whether you can open shop or not. I think that creates a lot of problem in terms of planning. Do I get my labor back? Do I start borrowing money again? Because I think it's interesting. Mr. Hiranandani did talk about the kind of credit which has been going to the SME sector. But if we just look back, I think last credit policy, RBI spoke of an SLTRO where small finance banks were being given 10,000 crores for lending to SMEs. How much money was actually mopped up? Just 400 crores. Why? Because SFPs don't want to borrow because they're not quite sure of the credit quality. Maybe there's not enough demand which is coming in because honestly, if I'm an SME, I'm not going to borrow money just because it's available because I don't even know if I'm able to proceed and do my business. So I think uncertainty is something which we need to address before the economy gets back to track. And our sense is that it's probably in August will be the earliest when there will be some signs of normalcy. June will still be lockdowns in most regions. July, maybe some kind of relaxation. So we're talking of around 4 months of the year, not really registering any kind of exciting growth. It'll be happening from August onwards. That's how we are coming to a number of around 8.8 to 9% from care ratings.
Sure. Okay, our first question coming to us from Rukmini Rao and Mr. Hiranandani. This one is directed to you. She says he was speaking about a calibrated approach. But fact is, since last year, partial lockdown, full lockdown, national shutdown, nothing seems to have worked. Cases may be coming down, but small businesses continue to being impacted. What is his idea when he says calibrated approach?
The first part is that those sectors which are able to survive the situation should be opened up, which did not take place last year. So many times the construction work was closed down, factories were closed down, other aspects of it were closed. So that sector has been permitted where the construction workers are on the sites or the factory workers are staying next to the sites. All that has now been permitted to be opened up. That is why certain sectors of the economy have improved in terms of whatever has happened. So that's a positive story which does not take place in the current times. The second part of the story is what we said, calibrated, because it depends on the extent of number of people who are infected, the number of beds which are available, oxygen that is available, and the situation that takes place. So you open out and then see that the number of people who are getting ill, are they being able to take care of it and mitigate the number of people who are dying, if at all they are. So that's the second part of it. But the third part, Sunanda, and that is what is the saddest part, that those sectors which are not being taken care of, and what Mr. Madan Sabnavis mentioned about the services sector which have been affected, especially the small people, that sector needs a targeted approach. The Prime Minister is an expert at the targeted approach, and he has done it in various sectors of society. So I do believe that this sector also needs a similar targeted approach. So we will have to take care of this sector too. And my view was personally that the food side of it could be the starting point of doing this particular activity very quickly in the urban sector also. It's already done in the rural sector, but we need to do it very much more stronger in the thing. That is what I meant by calibrated, that different areas at different times will need different positions to do it. For example, Mumbai has now a situation where it could have opened up rapidly, but because the environment around it with the other districts still on fire and the rest of the country in fire, they have postponed opening up as far as Mumbai is concerned. So that's a calibrated approach in terms of saying we will slow down the opening up for some time.
Next audience question coming to us from Vinay Kalani. He says he's partner at Vinay Enterprises. This is a great opportunity, he says, which has been missed by India to support, from what I understand, to support SMEs production and import substitution, which could have helped India on one hand and brought down unemployment on the other hand. What is the view of today's panel? He's going on to talk about the China model. I don't really want to make any comparisons at this point, but open to Madan, open to you, Mr. Hiranandani. How would you like to respond in terms of just import substitution, making imports of a lot of raw materials easier, and also boosting of production for small businesses? What more could have been done, perhaps? Madan, to you first.
Yeah, see, the thing is that we all know that SMEs are very important in terms of their contribution to exports as well as industrial production. Now, the question is that what kind of a policy has to be followed? Should it be one of pushing for exports where we do have a competitive advantage, or do we go in for import substitution? To my mind, I think the focus in terms of providing a boost to SMEs should be more on the export side rather than import side, because finally, at the end of the day, I think the purchaser, the purchaser of the good is going to take a decision whether that unit wants to buy from overseas where the quality, where the price is more competitive, or whether the person should buy from home. So I think that's what the government has been doing. There's been a lot of thrust which has been placed on exports, and I think the SMEs are very much part of this entire process. Unfortunately, I think on account of the pandemic, I think things have been held back. But today we have seen that the global economy is on the verge of a revival. In fact, it's in a state of revival. We're seeing global commodity prices increase. So I think this is a time when the SMEs should actually be given further incentives, both in terms of credit as well as facilitation by the government to leverage this opportunity.
Mr. Hiranandani, to you as well, given your close association also with ASSOCHAM, do you think it's a missed opportunity that more could have been done for small businesses, more hand-holding, more SOPs, import, more could have been done on the import of raw materials, etc.?
Sunanda, I think we needed much more. And that I agree with Mr. Madan Sabnavis, that the factors in the small and medium sectors are so sad that any support given in this sector is less. But the find is that the focus area in terms of certain areas which were so important, which is import substitution or importing exports, because the world over, various sectors of the economy have done extremely well all over the world. And if we could have targeted those certain areas, it would have become extremely important for us to take advantage of that situation completely. So I think there has been some missed opportunity over there. But COVID times are so horrendous that sometimes we're not able to see the end of the tunnel so easily. And probably they thought that there would be no second wave, and they expected that everything could be hunky-dory. But now that we have learned a lesson onto it, I think the focus on this segment is there. And that is why the statement of the governor of the Reserve Bank this morning, was also extremely important for us to understand and take forward. And I'm sure that Finance Ministry and Commerce Ministry will take it further forward.
That's all we could pack into this first part of the masterclass talking about the Mumbai model, but we're going to bring you part 2 where we will continue talking about the lessons that we have perhaps learned or not learned from the first 2 waves of this virus, and also do a look forward in terms of the impact of the economy and how we can reduce that. That's coming up in part 2 for tonight. It's a wrap. Stay home, stay safe. Mr. Hiranandani, do you want to add to that, inflation pressure, consumption pressure, a lot of things that small businesses are working with, as we're counting down to what should ideally be the best season for them, that is, the festive period coming up in the next few months?
Inflation is very, very, very challenging. You name the industry and this inflation is creating a problem. Look at the construction industry. We have had an increase in steel prices, which are more than 60%. The cement prices have gone up. GST of the cement is 28% without any tax credit available to construction. Inflationary tendencies are definitely going up, and that's a fear that I have actually.
Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, a platform where we allow you, the small business owner, to connect directly with some of India's biggest experts on a national platform and ask them your questions and voice your concerns in this face-to-face. I'm Sunanda Jaiseelan. Over the course of these 20 masterclasses, we address some of the most burning topics. Tonight, we're talking about the Mumbai model, how Mumbai managed to contain the spread of the virus and the lessons that the rest of us here in India can take away from the financial capital. Let me then introduce our panelists. Niranjan Hiranandani, co-founder MD Hiranandani Group. Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist, Care Ratings. What are perhaps some of the biggest lessons that we can take away from just being so proactive really about containing the pandemic in Mumbai?
So the first thing was chasing the virus. In those areas where the COVID situation is dense, the idea is to go into it. So you start with testing and then you move towards containment.
What is important is decentralization matters. So if we had this kind of a decentralized approach in every region, every state in which we had this problem, I think conditions would definitely be far different. And we may not be having those horror stories which we read about in different parts of the country, Bangalore and say Delhi, for example.
Things, when we're talking about lessons, also has to be lessons going forward. And we are now, talking about with great certainty that there's going to be a third wave. For entrepreneurs who've logged in today, what are perhaps the biggest lessons you, as entrepreneurs, you as economists have really taken away? And do you think we have learned enough lessons to be able to manage and handle this third wave better? Do you think our lessons have been learned and the impact of the third wave on small businesses and economy is perhaps going to be rather minimal? Could we be hopeful of that, Madan, Mr. Hiranandani?
No, actually, it's difficult for one to say whether we have learned our lessons because we need to see the third wave and see how we respond to it. Because I would say that our response to the second wave was not really that creditable. Because I think there was a bit of hubris where we all assumed that we're the best in the world and we've managed the COVID better than any other country. So that when the second wave came, I think accepting that there was a second wave itself took a lot of time. And I think that was a major problem, because I remember when Mumbai, Maharashtra was down with COVID, I know of lots of people who went to Goa saying, let's go on holiday out there because it's a very safe state and everything is normal out there. So maybe at that point of time, there should have been a clue taken by various governments to say that, look, what's happening in Maharashtra can actually spread to all other states and nobody is actually insulated from it. So I think we'll get to know whether we are better prepared only when we have the third wave and see what we respond. And I go back to say my opening remarks saying that we need to have clear templates which are in place. So why is it that Mumbai did better in the second wave? Because we actually had a system already in place to tackle it. Now, we should also have a system which actually sends the early warning signals where we have the lockdowns even before the numbers start going up to 10,000, 20,000 in any particular state. So I think that's what's really required. And maybe I think this is the job of the Niti Aayog to actually create these templates, pass it on to the states, since I think regional lockdowns definitely make more sense than a national lockdown because they're looking at local conditions. But there should definitely be a template which has to be followed by all states, and also give certainty to enterprise as to at what point of time would they be actually allowed to recommence the operations.
Okay. This is a question that is now coming to us from Aparna Jain. She's saying that, very pertinent points and very pertinent issues that have really been raised today. But the fact remains that a lot of workers and laborers who migrated to the small cities and towns because there were no jobs happening, while the second wave is opening up factories, the pandemic is hitting rural areas, and therefore we are not seeing the laborers and the migrant workers really coming back into the factories and the plants. It's a very unfortunate situation, of course, but how can this now be managed? Because even as manufacturing is coming back and the government is permitting really factories to remain open, the workers are still, that front is still being hit. How can this perhaps be managed, especially if we're looking at the festive season growth, etc.? What should one do in this situation? Open to both of you.
Sunanda, the first part of it is extremely important, which is the fact that this time the railways were open and nobody had to walk their way to 1,000 kilometers back home. So I think that has become extremely important confidence raiser, which has been done. The first time when the lockdown took place, 75 to 85% of the people went back home. This time, 20 to 25% of the people have gone back home because a large number of factories, lot of construction sites and all these things are still operating. But only the significant low bottom of the pyramid in terms of operation got hurt badly. And those are the ones who went back. Second, what has happened, this is actually the holiday season every year. People go back for agricultural operations, they go for marriages, they go for various other activities, including the second round of COVID. So the numbers normally are 10 to 15% every year. So I would say about 5 to 10% additional people went back this time as compared to the first time where 75% of the people went back to their villages. So I think there's a world of a difference in terms of river migration, which took place this time as compared to the earlier time. I think they managed it much better. But the only thing missing, and that I think Mr. Madan has correctly put it across, that it is the small and medium who don't have in-house workers, who don't have people working and living there. While we at our construction site who have got workers living there and are taken care of, or the factories which have in-house workers and workers living there have not had a problem. So this distinction between the ones who are having these facilities amongst as vis-a-vis the ones which are not having these facilities is a major problem that is happening. And about the fact of coming back, reverse migration is taking place. However, Sunanda, it's taking place very slowly. That's the problem. So it is going to happen. People will come back because there is fire in the villages and people do want to come back to the cities, but it's not as fast as you and I would like it to happen, but it is happening. But the fear is what Mr. Madan just mentioned about was the fact that we have to be well prepared for the third wave, well prepared, extremely well prepared, and that becomes a very crucial issue that we need to manage.
One thing I'd like to add to what Mr. Hirandani has said, see, we have also been carrying out these surveys with SMEs. Now, we've seen that some of the responses have been that, okay, people have gone back to their villages. Maybe the numbers were not as large as what it was last year. But the problem is that since the infections also spread to the rural areas, some of them need to stay back either because they're infected or they need to look after the families, maybe look after the agriculture part more than what they had to do earlier because of their personal involvement with the people who are infected. So that's why I think things are going to slow down, especially for this particular category of labor.
This one is coming to us from Aarti Rausch says, what is going to happen on inflation in this situation? Because consumption is not going up, supply chain may be coming back and slowly coming back, but inflation is going to be a huge concern, especially for businesses like us, small businesses, I would presume.
If you look at inflation, we have two indices and both of them tell different kinds of stories. If I look at the wholesale price index, which is running at over 10% and will probably remain high for the rest of the year too, I think we should remember that global commodity prices have started increasing quite substantially. If you look at edible oils, you look at metals, you look at engineering products. So there's been a big increase in terms of global prices. And since we are price takers for most of these commodities, that's gotten ingrained into our prices. So I'm saying this is a different story because in terms of manufacturing, I think the kind of loss of purchasing power or the loss of selling power, which was there for manufacturing, is being restored to a certain extent. So I think a large number of corporates will actually be happy that these prices are going up. But if you're looking in terms of the consumer price index, I think there is a lot of pain for us because of the way in which the index is structured and the way in which core inflation has been moving up. And most of the core inflation is based on the maximum retail price, the MRP. And once the MRP goes up, it rarely comes down again. So if I'm paying more for my medicines, more for healthcare, hospitalization, these prices are not going to come down. So it's something which we will have to live with. And the only positive thing for industry is that the RBI has stated very clearly that the focus is going to be more on growth rather than inflation. So even in case the CPI inflation number moves up prodigiously to say past 6%, I don't think there'll be any fear of interest rates being increased because that kind of an assurance has been provided by the governor already.
Mr. Hiranandani, do you want to add to that? You know, inflation pressure, consumption pressure, a lot of things that small businesses are working with as we're counting down to what should ideally be the best season for them. That is, the festive period coming up in the next few months.
Sunanda, inflation is very, very, very challenging. You name the industry and this inflation is creating a problem. Look at the construction industry. We have had an increase in steel prices, which are more than 60%. The cement prices have gone up. GST of the cement is 28% without an input tax credit available to construction. Inflationary tendencies are definitely going up, and that's a fear that I have actually. But as correctly said by Mr. Madan, that it is affecting the poorest of poor in a much more challenged way than it does the rest of the economy. Also, it hits the small and medium manufacturers when they cannot charge more for their end product. So that is the squeeze which is taking place in those segments which are challenged sectors of the economy. And no matter how much credit you give them, if there's an unlimited inflation that takes place, the problems in these sectors are definitely going to be very challenging. For instance, you can't raise the price of homes and houses at this point of time, but your construction cost is definitely going up. So in the affordable housing segment, where construction cost is a large portion of total cost as in the marketplace, you are going to get an inflationary tendency which will make these affordable homes unaffordable. Challenges will be there in all sectors if inflation goes unchecked over the period of time. But we hope that this is a temporary period, because otherwise you will also have interest rates moving up if this continues for a long period of time. And that would set a kind of a chain, which I think only Mr. Madan will be able to decode, because I would be petrified to know that this is not going to be checked at all over a period of 1 year. So with oil prices also going up, steel prices going up, all commodity prices going up, edible oils going up, we are definitely heading for a little problem. But I'm hoping that it would be temporary, same way we are hoping that we can take care of COVID situation.
I have to take a quick break. On that note, we're going to come back, continue taking in our viewer queries, and also talking about the lessons that we have perhaps learned from the first and the second wave, and being able to implement that the third wave. We're back in just a moment. To stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass. Today, we're talking about the Mumbai model and the lessons that the rest of us here in India can take away from India's financial capital when it comes to containment of the deadly coronavirus. There's a question that's coming to us. Dikshit Nair, he says he's a partner at A. Nair Sons Industries India. Why is the government not, just paraphrasing his question, why is the government not doing anything on raw material prices? Because that's clearly having a huge impact on small businesses.
It's a billion-dollar question, because once you open up the economy to the rest of the world, you are actually benchmarked with the rest of the world. So when oil prices were down, we had the benefit of it. When the oil prices are up, we are paying the penalty for it. If we are doing and opening up exports, the industries which are connected with the items of exports, we benefit from the price rise at the international level of exports. But if we are importing those items, we are in difficulty. So we have two choices. Either we integrate with the rest of the world, which is a choice after 1991, we will have to suffer the situation of the rest of the world in terms of economics. However, the whole world goes by the fact of subsidizing those segments which are endemic. So that is what is needed to be done. And that is what Mr. Madan has been talking about and asking for in terms of the economic necessity to take care of this. While on the other hand, I've been saying that food security is also important at the bottom of the pyramid. If these two aspects with health and hygiene is taken care of, I think we are there. The government of India has the capacity to do it. They have the wherewithal to do it. They are learned how to do direct money transfers. They have removed the middleman in most of the cases to be done. So I think it is possible for the government to do it. They have done a wonderful job in terms of certain direct money transfers in the case of the agricultural side. Let them do it also for the SMEs and also to do it for the urban poor. I think these are the two sectors which can work out extremely well in this situation, and we shall overcome the pandemic, whether it is second or third phase.
So two questions coming in around fuel and fuel prices, and what the future is looking like. I'm going to take both together. Arjit Dey, he says he's director at AD Group. I'm in the chemical sector. I've seen a steep fall in demand and sales has been impacted. What's the future looking like for the sector? That's one. And Narendra Yadav, he says he's joint director at HPCL. Is it petroleum prices which is driving inflation? Petrol prices, of course, in Mumbai, twice that of New York. What's really the future looking like? Very briefly, and then I'm going to take closing comments from our panelists.
Even today, when we're paying 100 rupees a litre for petrol, the actual cost of manufacture come commission which is paid to the petrol stations is not more than around 37, 38 rupees, which means around 60 to 62% of the price is actually taxes. And the government has stuck to this particular, when I say government, I'm referring to the center as well as states. They have stuck to this particular policy because when there's uncertainty in terms of collections of other indirect taxes like GST, and the consumption of petrol and fuel and diesel has come down on account of the lockdown, it becomes imperative for them to retain high prices and keep increasing the taxes at the margin so that the revenues are protected. So if I look at the revenue structure of the government in 2021, major gains were made in terms of excise, whereas GST collections fell. So I think this is something we have to live with. We never expected that the price would go up to 100 because in the past also the government has followed a similar policy. But normally we have seen that after 85, 88 rupees per litre of petrol, there used to be some kind of intervention which used to come and the burden used to be shared sometimes by the oil marketing companies along with the government. But today it looks like that the consumer pays the full price.
Okay. Let me then take closing comments from our panelists today. And I just want to do a quick bit of a look ahead. As we're looking at the rest of this fiscal, what are some of the factors that you would say are going to play out? Is there any silver lining that we could look at, predictions of a normal monsoon, the announcement as far as the special resolution of liquidity for small businesses, possibly there could be, some bit of revival coming in on consumption and demand. What are the next few months looking like on the economy front? Both to you, Mr. Hiranandani, if I can get your closing comments first, and Madan, what are we looking forward to? Anything that you want to leave our entrepreneurs with?
The good news is the fact that the healthcare side is now the focus of attention, both of the central and the state governments. I think everybody has flagged off the issue that there could be a second wave, which is taking time to get over. Also, the fact that there is a possibility of a third wave, and people are ramping up oxygen. Hospitals are putting up PSA plants. Other state governments, local authorities are putting up oxygen plants. Medicines are being collected and worked upon. We are looking at various aspects of putting up various centers all over the country. I think on the healthcare side, there is a big plus which has happened. On the economic side, we have a dual issue because there are sectors of the economy, as you can see in the stock markets, have had a biggest boom ever. And on the other hand, as you have mentioned correctly, and this is confirmed by Mr. Madan, there are segments of the economy which are in pain. So we have to take care of that pain, give it the necessary balm and medicine that is required, and really move forward on the thing. In the long run, I see a positive situation. So though the economy, as corrected by the Reserve Bank governor, shows less than the double-digit growth, I'm sure once the opening out takes place, as happened after the first wave last year, we also had a positive view once the opening up takes place and we ramp up back again. I think the country is ready to ramp back again. As far as inflation is concerned, we will have to see and how the agricultural operations this year take. And if agriculture is doing well, at least half the economy will be safeguarded because of the agricultural things that will happen. So I see a very positive next year. With the vaccination taking place and completed by the end of the year, 22 will be a good year, Sunanda.
Do you share that optimism, Madan?
In a very mild manner, because I think that a number of measures have been taken by RBI, the government. So I think all these little bits together will definitely help to assuage some of the sectors. I'm definitely concerned a lot about the SME sector because I think they go down very fast. It takes a long time for them to get back on their feet. So I would be a bit cautious out there in terms of how fast the recovery takes place. And I think there are lots of issues on the consumption side, on the investment side. So I think, but I think the positive thing could be, I think that when we have, if at all we do have a third wave, it looks like that we will behave in a more mature manner. We'll be able to react faster, address the issue faster, and probably have shorter periods of lockdowns rather than these long, uncertain lockdowns. And I would go along with Mr. Hirandani that the next year, 22-23, will definitely be better because I think somehow or the other we will manage whether the dosage should be 1 dose, 2 doses, multiple doses, whichever it is, mix and match. But I think by the end of March 2022, I should tend to think that a large part of our population should have been vaccinated. And therefore, I think the future waves will be less disastrous compared to the first and the second months.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through really perhaps what the next few months could look like and what's the impact that we've seen. That concludes part 2 of the Leaders of Tomorrow Masterclass, where we've been talking about the Mumbai model and the lessons that the rest of us in India can really take away from Mumbai in terms of containment of the coronavirus. We're down to the last 2 masterclasses here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. Do remember to head on over to our website to check and see for yourself what we're going to be doing over the last 2. For tonight, it's a wrap. Stay home, stay safe.